In our last session, we were looking at the two Beatitudes. Blessed are the merciful and blessed are the peacemakers. And we were taking some time to unpack that we need to act on our healing and release forgiveness for our own benefit and for the benefit of others. And I wondered how easy you found that. I wondered whether you found yourself again struggling with some of those principles. But what we saw was it's something that God expects of us, that if we, with the measure we use, it will be measured to us. So there is a sense that it's an important part of our journey that we're willing to do that. In this session, we're going to return to a beatitude that we've already looked at once, and we're going to pick up again that blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And we're returning to this principle of getting clean. We took some time previously to look at how we might get clean and the importance of the purity of being cleaned and getting rid of the rubbish. But what we want to do in this session is to take this a stage further. We've been working really hard to clear out the rubbish in both us and in our relationships, and it's important that we pause and we actually recognise how far we've come, recognise that we've done really well. But we couldn't have got this far on our own. It's really important that we recognise that we're doing this in partnership with God. Now that we've begun to make some progress, I hope that you're starting to realise that the power of the things that you've been living with for so long are actually starting to be broken, that you don't have to carry around that weight that you've been carrying all these years. The reality is that God has come, Jesus has come, but we might have life and life to the full. And we can start enjoying that as we clear out the rubbish. Having done that, it's really important that we now start to invest in safeguarding the progress that we've made so that we don't slip backwards. And it's really important that we don't get complacent. You know, we're standing at a crossroads moment. We've made progress, we've seen the power of those things broken, and now it's picking up that principle that Jesus talked about, that when we clean the house out, if we leave it clean and empty, then what we had before will come back with a vengeance. So cleaning the house out means we then need to also fill it with something else. If we look at our cycle of change, where we're at today is we're at the relapse stage. We're at the stage of looking at how we might prevent relapse from happening and how to safeguard our progress so that we can move forward. And this principle of being pure in heart, it takes us a stage further. Having cleaned out the rubbish, it's how do we stay clean? When we've reached this stage in our journey, it's very tempting to think, right, okay, we've dealt with some of the issues, now we can just get on with life. And it's very easy to fall back into some of the old habits. It's very easy to fall back into some of the old ways of thinking and some of the old ways of responding to different situations and become complacent. We're feeling good, we're feeling in control, so we don't have to keep working at it. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 12 gives us a really clear warning. It says, if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. I know from my own experience that having done well and lost several stones, I found myself in a place where I thought, yeah, I'm doing all right. And I started to relax on what I was doing. With my own weight loss journey, I found myself becoming complacent and thinking, yeah, I know what I'm doing here, I can do this. And before I knew it, we'd stopped going to group, we'd stopped connecting in with what we were doing, and suddenly found ourselves in a place where not only have we put back on all the weight that we'd lost, but more. And I found myself looking in the mirror and coming to a place of realising that actually I'd lapsed in what I was doing. It's very easy to become complacent and take our eye off the ball. And we have to come to a place where we recognise that complacency is the enemy of growth. We've done really well. We've broken some of the power of some of these things in our life. We've developed tools and ways of recognising what's going on and how to deal with things. But now it's time to start growing that fruit of self-control. It's time to grow some strength and some resilience, and to come up with ways to stop ourselves from falling back. It's important at this stage that we realise that we need to be connecting in with God. We want to desire to know Him better, know Him more, and it's time, if we're going to prevent ourselves from slipping backwards, it's time that we make a decision to invest in our relationships with other people, in our relationship with ourselves, but also in our relationship with God. So let's pose ourselves the question, if it's easy to slip back, how do we build a relapse prevention plan? It's often said that a failure to plan is a plan to fail, and that's why it's really important that we are wise, realistic and ready. Some of the things that we've been dealing with in our life, we've broken the power of them, but they've been such a part of our life for so many years that we're very familiar with them. You know, if our natural way to respond to something that goes wrong is to get angry, it's very easy to instinctively fall back into some of those ways. And so building a plan is an important part of safeguarding what we've done. And I want to introduce you to how to build a relapse prevention plan. It begins with the idea of triggers, and I don't know whether you understand what's meant by that, but triggers are the things that make us vulnerable or cause us to do the different things that we've wanted to get rid of in our life. And recognising what they are is an important part of putting a plan in place to stop ourselves from slipping back. For some people, the trigger is tiredness. When we're tired, then we're more susceptible to do some of those things we did. Our defences are down. We don't have the strength or the resilience that we did have. Some of the people I work with, dates are a trigger. That every year when it comes round to the anniversary of an event, a death of a family member, you know, for some of our guys who were in prison, they never got to say goodbye to parents who passed away while they were in prison. And so every year when the date comes round, it's a trigger for them to potentially lapse in different ways. For some people, I know for some men, time is a trigger. I've worked with some men who would stay up after their wife had gone to bed and go onto the computer, and that would be a time that they would engage in looking at the wrong things on the computer, and really didn't want their partner to know. Recognising what our triggers are means that we can then begin to plan our response to them. If we know that we're vulnerable at a certain time of day, if we know we're vulnerable when we're hungry, it's a bit like the Snickers advert, you know, you eat something, you know, you're not the same when you're hungry. I think there's a big truth in that actually for some of us, recognising those triggers are the key to putting a plan in place. And joke as we might be about Snickers, actually that was the plan. When you're hungry and you're going to respond in a bad way, eat something. Sometimes it's a really simple solution, but how are you going to recognise those triggers? What are the warning signs for you that you're slipping back into some of those things? And when you see those things, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to respond? And then, if we've looked at that, we've recognised what our triggers are, we've identified how we're going to spot them when they start to come up, and begin to plan how we're going to respond to them, we can use the tools that we've been learning on this journey. We can learn how to take every thought captive and submit it to the will of Christ. We can bring it out into the open. If we've, you know, the other part of a relapse prevention plan is to connect with support. There's a real power of strength in numbers. I know that for some of the people I've worked with, particularly when they're working in the area of addressing pornography, there's a tool called Safe Eyes that they can put on their computer, and it sends an email to somebody if you look at the wrong thing on the computer. That was a great way of creating accountability. And walking the journey with somebody is actually really helpful. Somebody that you trust. We've talked about safe people, and finding a safe person who you can trust, who knows you well enough to be able to spot when you're in the red zone, when you're in the danger zone. You can start to work on a plan. You also know that you have exchanged your willpower for the power of God, the strength of God. And so when you face some of those things, connect with God. When you see the triggers coming up, when you start to put the tools in place, go to God and pray. Go to God and bring it out into the open before Him. Keep the short accounts. Isolation is a real enemy. It's really easy to fall back into the old ways when we think no one's watching. But if we do all those things, a real important part of a relapse prevention plan is to enjoy your freedom. You've worked really hard to get to this point. You've connected with God, you've drawn on God's strength, your relationships are growing stronger, you're becoming free of the issue that has hurt you for so long. Remember that the devil wants to steal, kill and destroy. You know, he wants to keep you locked up in your pain. And when we surrender, we're actually allowing him to keep us trapped and keep us locked up. And none of us want that. So actually enjoying the freedom, we've worked to get free. The devil wants to take away our joy. And so actually enjoy where you're at. Don't let him rob you of the joy. You've worked this way, you've got rid of the anger, and suddenly your relationships are getting stronger and healthier. You're no longer tired at night, tired in the day because you've been up all night on pornography. You know, these things are things to celebrate, that actually I'm getting my life back. I have so much to be thankful for, so much to be grateful for, that actually I'm going to enjoy the freedom and the place that I've come to. It's actually a lie to think that we can't enjoy the fruits of the journey. You're allowed to be content. I know some people that I've worked with who, unless there's a crisis, unless there's something going on which requires intervention, then there's something wrong. Actually, the only way they could be happy is if there was a constant crisis to be addressed. And I don't believe that's healthy. I believe that's linked in with unhealthy coping mechanisms and false beliefs, because we were created to live life to the full. And when we clear out the rubbish and we come to a place of freedom, it's time to enjoy living life to the full. It's time to enjoy our freedom and rest in the moment. I think sometimes as Christians we draw on verses like I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me as a reason for not having to give serious thought to how we plan to look after ourselves. We're invited to walk this journey of discipleship. We're invited into this amazing relationship with God where we can enjoy our freedom. And it's important, therefore, that we're not unaware of the devil's schemes. And that's one of the reasons why planning how we can make sure that we don't slip back into the old habits is really important. One of the things that can help us as we begin to ask the questions of what might we put into a plan, how might we develop a plan, is to think in terms of meditation. Meditation sometimes as Christians is something that we think belongs to other religions and doesn't have a place very often for the sort of Christian expression. But Christian meditation is a really good quality to develop, and it's important to understand that it's different to the other religions, because whereas other religions might be about emptying ourselves and emptying our mind, Christian meditation is actually about filling our mind and filling our mind with the things of God. When you do a recovery program, often when we get to this point in the program, we talk about improving our conscious contact with God. And it's about strengthening that relationship we have with our higher power, or with Jesus Christ, for those of us who are followers of Jesus. We want our relationship with him to grow stronger, and taking time to meditate by opening the Bible and looking at that, looking at different verses and letting our mind be filled with the things of God can actually help to make that a stronger process. But it can also be an important part of safeguarding the journey we're on and being wise. In 1 John 1, John writes that if we claim we're without sin, we're only fooling ourselves and we're not living in the truth. So it's very easy for sin to be there, be present, and for the devil to come tempting. Remember, one of the things that the devil wants to do is steal, kill and destroy, so he'll be looking for opportunities to drag us back down again. So protecting our journey is an important part of walking wisely with God. And to do that through something like meditating, spending time with God. Some people would call it a quiet time. Some people would call it getting alone with God. Some people would use different expressions. But the principle is, can we actually set aside a time to be with God, that we might get to know him better and allow that chance for our relationship with him to become a two-way relationship? It's often important for us to find somewhere to slow down long enough for God to get a word in edgeways. We live in a fast-moving world with lots and lots going on, and sometimes it's hard for us to actually stop and to listen. So setting aside a regular time to read, to pray, to connect with God is a really important step if we want to get a stronger relationship with God, and in doing that be open to God speaking to us and showing us areas where we're at risk. In doing that, we can also continue to use the inventory that we made, that list that we made when we were looking through earlier in our series, looking at those things in our life and on the impact they've had on us. Using that list to stay honest is an important part of the journey. We can revisit that list at regular intervals and say, how are we doing? Are those things still manageable, still under control? Or have they reared their head again? Are we falling back into some of the old habits? But practicing forgiveness and practicing thankfulness are good tools, to enjoy our recovery, to enjoy the freedom that we found in God, means actually coming with a thankful heart. It's all right sometimes to sit down and to spend time with God where we can actually thank him for the freedom that he's brought us. And I think that's a good part of what we do. But practicing accountability is another useful tool at this point to help us to stay honest and to be honest in our dealings with God, to look at where we're at and to ask ourselves honest questions about whether there are areas that we're at risk. Some people like to journal, and journaling is a good tool to be able to use where we can write things down, and when we revisit them we've actually got something of the journey. We've got some evidence, some markers that we've put down that we can look back at over time and go, I was there, now I'm here, thank you God for the journey that I'm on. But also sometimes we can look at it and go, oh yeah, I can actually see I'm falling back into some of the old ways of thinking. Another useful tool might be to do something which a few years ago was all the rage, but we don't tend to talk about it so much now, but to find yourself a prayer partner. There's a power in accountability. There's a power in having somebody who we trust, who we can go to, who we can share with. For married couples, it's good that married couples could pray together, spend time together with God. But sometimes it's also helpful to have somebody outside of that who we can take time with, who honestly knows us, who can look at us, and if they see something in us where we're at risk of slipping backwards, they can then speak into our lives and be somebody who we trust, who can give us wise words of advice and point out to us when things are maybe on a slightly slippery slope. All of these things are good ways that we can embed some of that planning, embed some of that work we can do to make sure that we can stay in the freedom that we have found in God. Building a plan is an important part of that journey. It's an important part of staying clean because it allows us to make sure we have something in place to spot the warning signs early and to know what to do when we see them. You know, staying clean is something to celebrate, and it's also something to work at, because remember, a failure to plan is a plan to fail. So in this session, we've been taking time to think about investing in our relationships, investing in our relationship with God, investing in our relationship with ourselves, and investing in our relationship with other people. Being there for other people and having other people being there for us is part of doing life together. It's part of how we can spur each other on to good deeds. It's part of our iron sharpening iron. There's all these encouragements in the Bible for us to do life together, to look out for each other. You know, when you look at some of the passages of the Bible, it talks about us, you know, helping people to avoid falling down again and helping to pick people up when they struggle. Psalm 24 says, who may approach God, but those whose hands and hearts are pure. God took the initiative towards us while we were still sinners, and he invites us into a relationship, warts and all. He invites us to come into a living relationship with him when we're not right. The beautiful thing is he accepts us when we are dirty. He accepts us when our hands aren't clean, when our hearts aren't pure. But when we're living in a relationship with somebody that we love, we want to let that relationship grow. And it's one thing to come into a relationship in that place, but if 10 years down the line we're no further forward, we're still living the same old dirty life that we lived before we became a Christian, I'd challenge you to actually say, where is the evidence of the grace of God at work in your life? If you're serious about surrendering your life to God, have you allowed him to speak into your life? And are you actually growing as a Christian by dealing with those areas of your life that you know you need to? But if you're also stuck in this sin confess cycle where for years and years, you know, you keep making the same mistakes and going to God and saying, will you forgive me? And God said, yeah, you know I will. But then we go and fall for the same lie again and we make the same mistakes again. That's one of the reasons why building a plan is so important if we want to break this sin confess cycle of keep going back over the same old again. Our beatitude today is, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And it's reminding us of this value of being pure and being blessed. You know, blessed are those who keep themselves clean. You know, it's one thing for us to get clean, and having done all of that hard work to get clean, blessed are those who stay clean. You know, you don't have to fall for the same lie. We've taken the time and put the effort in to remove the rubbish that gets in the way of our relationship with God. And having done that, you know, we want to enjoy the relationship with God, because this promise is, and blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. The promise is that if we do that work, our relationship with God will grow stronger and will grow clearer, and we will be able to enjoy more and more of that life in a relationship with God. Continuing to enjoy our freedom, it's important we don't slip backwards, and keeping working at our relationship with God is an important way of doing that. Keeping short accounts is an important part of making sure we continue to enjoy our freedom, so that when we see an issue, we can take action quickly because we know what to do. So let me encourage you, a failure to plan is a plan to fail. And so if you found yourself stuck with this sin confess cycle of having dealt with things in your life, you find them coming back in, let me encourage you, maybe it's time to build a plan to stay clean.